In this lesson, we'll learn how to apply additional filters when working with events. To do this, create a new workflow. Focus on the event push. In this project, we have several tasks that we'll be working on. And right now, our main focus is on the event push feature. To proceed, I will be creating a specific filter that is tailored specifically for this particular event. So the first filter, most commonly used one in my opinion, is branches. These are branches. We can filter by one more branches. It's very common to have a practice where the workflow should only run on a push to the main branch, and nothing should happen when working with any other branches, meaning the workflow shouldn't be triggered. It's really simple to do. We need to pass the branches parameter and specify which branches. In this case, I'm going to specify the main branch. Let's temporarily remove these unnecessary events, such as automated tests and notifications, from here, as we don't need them for our current workflow. This specific event, which is a deployment trigger, will only be activated when we push changes to the main branch of our repository. In any other scenario, such as pushing to a feature branch or making local commits, it won't be triggered, ensuring that our deployment process remains stable and controlled. Next, the following parameter we can filter by, besides branches, is tags. We can also filter by tags, we don't have any tags in the repository right now, but we won't test this moment. We'll just write it down so you understand how it's done. We pass the text, and in it we simply write down the tags we want to filter by. Let's say we're interested in the first version. And there's another interesting point, guys. We can even use some patterns, because our versions can come in different forms, like this one, or this kind of version, and so on. To avoid listing all the specific versions, we're interested in the first version and all its subversions. So we can use a pattern and pass a wildcard like this. In our case, the wildcard will cover this part and this part. Keep that in mind when writing your workflow. You can use additional patterns. These patterns are present in the documentation. I'll also attach a link to the lesson. Here's a list of additional characters that will help you create these patterns, but now I'll also show you a couple more. There are also tasks where you need to exclude a specific version. To exclude in filters, we use the negation sign. The negation sign in programming is the exclamation mark. So of course we'll put it in quotes, write the negation sign, and for example, we want to exclude version 1.2.1. So when pushing specifically to this tag, we shouldn't trigger this pattern. I also missed the letter V here, because it's assumed that this is how my tag will look. You can also use patterns here when working with branches. Notice that in previous lessons, we created a page about branch, and we can have many such branches, for example, page contact, page blog. Besides pages, there can be other branches, like a feature branch and a feature comments branch, not a page, but a feature. If we want to set a trigger for a branch that contains page, we can do it like this. We can specify the branch as page, followed by a wildcard. So we're using the same pattern here, and in this case, when we have page about, it will work perfectly. By the way, we also missed the quotes here. Let's add them. So, this specific pattern will work great with branches of this type, like about, or with branches of this type, or with branches of this type, and so on. Here you've already put it. So under the asterisk there can be any characters. And there's one more thing, guys. Asterisks allow any character but slashes. Use 2 for page category. Exclude page block with notation. If we have a branch with a name like page category or lifestyle, it won't work because that symbol is present. If our branch looks like that, we need to approach it a bit differently. In that case, we should use 2 asterisks. 2 asterisks will allow for such branches and will be understood perfectly. If there's a task to exclude a certain branch, like page block, and it falls under this filter and gets included, then we need to use the following notation. We write the branch itself and add negation at the beginning of the branch. If there's a task to exclude a certain branch, like page block, and it falls under this filter and gets included, then we use the following notation. We write the branch itself and add negation at the beginning of the branch. This way, it will ignore the page block branch. But, guys, when you use this approach, please be careful because there's a logical sequence here. If you put this line, for example, here, like this, then he will ignore this matter. Why? Because it uses all the conditions at once. It will check to exclude the block, but then immediately on the next line, it will see that go ahead, please use all the pages, regardless of whether it is about or blog. So you can't write this line here, you need to write it after. That is, first we make a general pattern, then we exclude it from it, if there is such a need. Besides this method, we can also exclude branches in another way, using the additional parameter branches, ignore. Let's use branches.ignore and pass, for example, this page to blog to demonstrate how it works in a practical scenario and see the results in detail. More precisely in the branch in the log. But be careful, guys, you can only use branches, ignore when we're not using branches. So if we have a task to push everywhere but just exclude page block in the branch, then we use branches, ignore. In all other cases, we use this first approach. Even the documentation suggests that you can't use both branches. And branches.ignore as parameters for the same event. So I'm removing this from here. I just showed it to you for demonstration. The next filter we're going to look at is paths. It allows us to track changes in specific locations, specific files. So I can set an option that if the changes are only in HTML files, then we'll run this workflow. Let's set it up. I'm using paths, and then I'm using, again, a pattern to write this path. I'm using 2 asterisks HTML. So what patterns are used here? Be careful. They are different from the patterns used for branches and tags. For branches and tags, the patterns in the documentation are used. Here they are. And for working, files and directories paths, the patterns are located just below. Take a look, here they are. In my case, I want to select all HTML files, so I use this pattern. And no matter which directory it's in, whether it's in the root or in some nested directory, keep that in mind. And when you're working, you'll always go back to this documentation and know that there's one pattern table for branches and tags and a different table for paths. Let's go back. Wonderful. But now here's the thing. If I run this workflow right now, it won't trigger at all because all the conditions we've set here need to be met. They use and, not or, so it's not just the main branch or anything else. It has to be all together. So, to make this condition somewhat achievable, I at least need to remove the tags because I'm not using them. We're not going to remove the branches because they actually allow us to either have a push to main or to another branch. Here, the logical connection is rather between branches, text, and paths. Now our trigger will only track changes in HTML files and push to the main branch. If I just commit and run this file now, my specific workflow, this 6th one, should not run. But if I edit the index file and push again, then it should trigger, because in that case, both filters will activate. Or if I run it on the About page and edit some HTML file, then it will also trigger. So any of these conditions can happen simultaneously with this condition. Let's simply test this out. Let's just go right now to our repository and currently disable the 5th workflow so it doesn't run in order to ensure that it will not be executed. Let's go back to the repository and finish up by running this 6th workflow. Just a reminder, Logically, if we've done everything right, the action shouldn't trigger now. Let's refresh the Actions tab. As we can see, there are no actions. There are no actions, that is, we just had a commit. Let's take a look. You see, here's our entire new workflow, but the action didn't trigger. Why? Because we didn't edit the HTML file. We're not hitting the trigger we need based on the conditions. Let's edit the HTML file. Let's carefully edit the HTML file. We're starting a new commit. And push. Let's go to the repository, to the Actions tab. Now, as we can see, we meet the condition and our workflow is starting. And it also shows our branch, and our workflow has already been successfully executed. This simple method can be used for filtering and creating more customized filters.